Hi, my name is Zhailon Levingston. I am a freelance director and organizer with the Broadway Advocacy Coalition. So, part of my job is that of a freelance director, which means I kind of hop from gig to gig, show to show, project to project, either doing work that I've been contracted to do, and that is either developing a play or a musical or a workshop or a reading, or something that is original that I've either written or conceived of myself. And the other part of my job is that of a resident director on Broadway at the Tina Turner musical, and that job entails maintaining a show that I did not originally direct, but making sure that the integrity of that show remains the same long after the original director has left. And so most of the time I'm doing a mix of both of those kind of director paths, which can be a bit insane, but is how I like to flow in the world. And then the other big part of what I do is organize at the intersection of advocacy and theater making with the Broadway Advocacy Coalition. I am the director of industry initiatives, and I work with our community partners on Broadway and in New York to help create programs that promote both diversity, equity, and inclusion, and also sustainability and accountability as it relates to creating equitable workspaces. So at Tina, there's a few different phases to what you do, or what I do there at Tina. I started as what you would call an associate director, and that gig was about making sure that I was able to take clear notes for the director of the show, making sure I also was able to write down and copy all of the blocking for the show, and basically assist the core creative team in making the vision of Tina on Broadway come alive. And some like small task that can look like from day to day can be working with particular actors on very specific things that maybe the main director cannot hit within the typical schedule. And so I'm called in to go into another room and work with an actor on X, Y, and Z. We have a lot of children in Tina, actually. About 4 kids, I think 4 or 5 kids that are flowing in and out of the show, and a big part of my gig as an associate was making sure that they learned their tracks from the show, and I work with the international associate director and making sure that happened. And then we open the show. And once the show opens, my gig becomes a little different. I am in charge of maintaining the show, and that looks like auditioning actors for the show, taking notes on the show and giving those notes to actors who are currently in the show, running rehearsals for the show, putting swings and understudies in the show, and making sure that the original cast is staying as polished as possible, so that anytime someone comes to see the show, it looks as crisp and as exciting as opening night. So I grew up in Shreveport, Louisiana, where I did tons of community theater, because the theater programs in the public schools weren't amazing by the time I wanted to do theater. And so for my community, it was about community theater. And I started out really concentrated on acting, specifically musical theater. And I was given the opportunity by my director at the time to start either co-choreographing a show or co-directing a show or assisting him on a show. And I think he saw in me the ability to think with the scope of how a director has to think, and then gave me an opportunity to exercise that. But I still think for a very long time, through my teenage years and off into college, because I studied musical theater in college, I assumed that you were supposed to act for a very long time, and then magically one day someone knocks on your door and tells you you're allowed to start directing. And that is not how it ends up happening. come to find out. And so after I left college, I went to college in Los Angeles and then moved to New York after I got my equity card. And I thought I would be, tap dancing on Broadway. And what happened was I was, getting, little gigs here and there, acting, and also some big callbacks and such. But I also was slowly starting to get work behind the table just by being curious and wanting to be a part of the theatrical community. So I would just ask people that I met, hey, can I assist you? Hey, can I sit by you? Hey, can I see what your process is like? And around that same year in 2016, as a result or a reaction to the murders of Alton Sterling and Philando Castile, I created what was supposed to be a one-night only event called Words on White, wherein I got a bunch of actors together and we read the words of other activists and artists and cultural leaders from the past who had dealt with the themes of racism and police brutality and white supremacy. And we got a theater, we got actors, I directed the thing, produced it, and it became a kind of a real key for me in terms of what my path and what my point of view in this industry would end up eventually being, which is like squarely at the intersection of arts and activism. And what was supposed to be a one night only thing became a campaign that me and my collaborators continued doing all around the city in parks and churches and schools and collaborations with organizations for about 2 years. And so I kind of met the industry in this untraditional way wherein they were meeting me as this devised theater artist who was really investigating the role of the arts in our current kind of moment of critical mass around race in America. And then from there, I went to go direct a production that was not at the intersection of arts and activism at all, but would take all of the skills I knew as a director and a choreographer and test them because it was a really big musical. And I told myself, if I go down to Louisiana and direct this show and can do it by myself, then I have what it takes to come back to New York and quit any day job I have and just become a freelance director. And so I went and directed that musical, came back and quit my day jobs and just began telling the universe and the world that I was a director now. And it was a very hard, very hard journey to get from like making that decision to actually like not being able to worry so much that I would be able to pay my rent. That was probably another 2 years of just like working and grinding and saying yes to as many things as I can. And so much of how I got here, because I didn't go to school for directing, was thanks to the relationships that I built in the first couple of years that I was in New York. So I would get coffee dates with people and just meet up with folks in the park, and anyone that I saw act or anyone whose play I like or any director I was interested in, I would just meet them and get to know them and try to get them to know me and like me and share my vision with them. And over time, as their careers started to manifest in a certain way, they would bring me along and ask me to do this play or that workshop. And so that's kind of how, I went from just doing work that was solely at the intersection of arts and activism to also being able to do that and also be a developer of new work in the city. And so the bulk of the work that I have done outside of the realm of advocacy has been in new play or new musical development. Honestly, it was probably a production of a one-man show called Neptune that was written by a collaborator and friend of mine named Timothy Dwight that I did way downtown off Broadway at a festival. And it was such an amazing experience because I truly got to craft and see the creation of a play from just a few pages to full production. And it was at a moment wherein I was learning so much more about directing as well. And I was working with an artist who was a very, very successful slam poet, but also was now stepping into straight acting for the first time. And so it was cool to be kind of, what do you call it? Growing and developing with an artist that you're working with in a very kind of rigorous, intentional way. And so much about what I think I know about directing, I got to test out in that show and learn from that show, so that then I could do other things that may look cooler on paper at times, but as an experience, being able to work on that show with Timothy was probably one of the dopest things that I've been a part of. So the Broadway Advocacy Coalition started about 5 years ago with a group of Broadway artists, majority of which were in a Broadway production of a musical called Shuffle Along. And they also were responding to the deaths of Philando Castile, Alton Sterling, Sandra Bland. I mean, the list goes on, but particularly those who we lost in the year 2016. And they believed that there had been Broadway and industry support for every issue except for Black Lives Matter. And so they decided to produce an event called Broadway for Black Lives Matter. And as a part of that event, they partnered with Columbia University and specifically Columbia Law School. And through that relationship and the resources Columbia Law School had were able to convene a room full of artists, lawmakers, policy hawks, policemen, organizers, professors, all into one room a day before the actual event to be able to actually just talk about these issues. And what we learned, and I say we because at that point I was invited into the room as a representative of Words on White, the campaign I was talking about earlier. And what we kind of learned is that what is so rare is for all of the key players to be able to be in one room using shared vocabulary to talk about an issue they all wanted to have impact on. And as I stayed on with BAC as a organizer with them, that became a fundamental part of the work that we did in the world, which was putting the players in the room who hardly ever get to talk to each other, but who are all directly impacted by a certain issue, centering the arts as a vehicle for storytelling that can have real impact by situating those stories in what we call theaters of change, wherein the audiences are curated members of the performance who can actually make real impact and change happen. So this could be doing work at the state capitol, doing work in the school system, doing work on the steps of a courthouse, but making the theater the place wherein change is actually possible. And so through our work at the Broadway Advocacy Coalition, we have developed a course called the Theater of Change, which is about how different types of people can come together around these stories and actually learn a methodology that leads to real impact, we think, in the world. And so the Theater of Change includes directly impacted individuals, law students, and artists, and we put them all in a room and we work on these projects that have what we call engagement strategies around them that hopefully lead to the change that we want to see in the world. That's one side of the work that we do. And we also do public forums for the industry at large to hopefully boost our community's capacity to be able to talk about and work through the kind of changes we want to see in the industry, and also give access to the work that's already been going on or is happening currently in the industry in regards to real kind of change work. We also are developing a workshop that we're calling Reimagining Equitable Productions that will be for theater owners and Broadway companies to be able to go through the kind of methodology that we're developing in order to get them and help them build capacity around finding the policies they will need and desire for the industry that they're walking into post-COVID, post-pandemic. And hopefully this process really ensures sustainability and accountability so that 5, 6, 7, 10 years from now, the industry is still being affected by the work of what came out of this kind of George Floyd era that we're in currently. Well, for a long time, it was based on if they could pay me anything. To be frank, so much of being a freelance director in the city is just saying yes to as many opportunities as you can, so that you can learn as much as you can, while you're on the job. And then as you're able to not have to say yes to every single thing, then it's about, at least for me, what is truly thrilling. What can I think about every day and not get tired of? Because ultimately I am gonna have to hold that project in my head. And or what is truly terrifying? What do I think I cannot achieve? And so I better say yes, because if I can do it, then I will undoubtedly be a better artist by the end of the journey. So a mix of things that excite me or scare me. And I mentioned the show Neptune. And when I went in for my interview with the playwright, he asked, how can we make Neptune on stage? The show was about a young HIV positive black boy in Brooklyn who hears that Neptune is a place of refuge for those who have been hard to love. And he asked in the interview, how would I make Neptune? And I said, I don't know. In the interview, I said, I have no clue. But that is a question that would haunt me through this entire process. And ultimately, in hindsight, he told me that was the reason I got the job, was because I was excited about the unknown possibility. I was excited about what I didn't know. I was excited about what was scaring me at the time and willing to express that. And so that makes me really think about oh yeah, everything I say yes to has something in it that I'm like, I haven't conquered that before and I want to try it. So that's something that I think really contributes to whether or not I do a show. For those who are interested in being a director, really the only advice I have is the only way to learn how to be a director is to direct. There's so many ways of directing. There's no one right way of directing, and there's no right path. Every single director has a completely different path. Therefore, the only thing I can really say to a general audience about what's the first step, it is to literally just say yes to directing something, be it a reading of a friend's play in an apartment, or a workshop in a studio somewhere. And literally your first thing you direct, you will learn probably 70% of what you will need to continue doing it professionally. Hey, thank y'all for watching. You can follow me on Instagram at Zhailon, Zhailon, or on Facebook, Zhailon Levingston.